Welcome back to WBTV News this morning here on Bounce TV. We're coming up on the 60th anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education ruling, that Supreme Court ruling ordering the desegregation of schools. And WBTV is airing a special presentation produced here by Steve Crump, one of our veteran reporters here at WBTV.
You're making me sound old.
No, that puts a complete credibility to it, because looking at the previews and looking at some of the people you talk to, I know this is going to be quite an informative special. Tell us first, because you go to South Carolina to look in depth at schools. Any particular reason why South Carolina?
Absolutely, because Christine, a lot of instances people think of Brown versus Topeka, Brown versus Board of Education, and the roots are right here in South Carolina, in Somerton, South Carolina, with a family that has Charlotte connections, the family of Reverend J. Delane Sr. And we talked to his son, but this goes back 1949, 1954, and the fact of the matter is the Delanes were involved in organizing local African-American communities and disenfranchised people for the pursuit of improving quality of education kinds of things, and they ended up paying a very severe price for that.
Wow. Tell us, we talked a little bit in the break about some of the people you interviewed in this special. Run some of those names off and what they talked about.
Well, you know, you talk about that, and from the standpoint of the people here in the Carolinas, it's a bit of a who's who sort of scenario, because we talked to Congressman Jim Clyburn of South Carolina, who makes an interesting point. He says, before African Americans could go to school in South Carolina, the cotton had to be brought in. So therefore, African American students ended up having a shorter school year, sometimes 3 and 4 and 5 months per year. We talked to Dorothy Counts and her experience of what happened as she tried to enter Harding High School back in 1957. And the reality is, as much as this is a examination of history, it's also a look at current events, simply because CMS Superintendent Heath Morrison talks about the role of charter schools and how in some instances they may not be making the grade.
Yeah, because it's interesting, because as part of this special, as you kind of just touched on here, you're comparing how the school systems were back then to how they stack up now. Are they making the grade? Are they meeting the standards that you would expect now in 2014, now that we're past desegregation?
I think when you look at time in history, there are several things that occur here, simply because in 1954, when the Supreme Court ended up weighing in on this, there was the whole issue as it related to equity, as it related to facilities. You know, you talk about South Carolina schools back in the 1950s. In many places in rural South Carolina, white students had school buses, black students had to walk to school. White students had indoor plumbing, black students had outhouses.
It's something that I think a lot of young people may not be able to really put their arms around and connect to and grasp.
Right. Simply because
having not lived through it.
Yeah, and I think when you have parents and grandparents that are able to be the great griots and tell the stories of what happened, young people have a lot of problems as it relates to comprehending. It's like, oh, that's make-believe. Oh, that didn't happen. But the reality is, when you sit in a room with a Dorothy Counts, as I did last night at a program at UNC Charlotte, and you hear the abject hatred that someone like that had to go through, you realize that it did happen, and that still 60 years later, there are some issues to be worked out.
All right, so tomorrow night, 7:30 on WBTV.
On the big channel.
On the big channel. How long did it take you to put this together, would you say?
We worked on this for a good month and a half, and there are a lot of people here I need to thank. Troy Bowlby, excellent photographer, who worked with this. Mike Rohde, Ruben Marui, John Wicker. The graphics right there, you see the Brown at 60, that's some of John Wicker's artwork. So it was a team effort.
Yeah.
And
a fantastic team at that. So Crump, good to see you.
Always
Can't wait to watch it tomorrow night. Right. It's going to be fantastic.
Okay.
All right, Al.
Can I